Hey everyone, thanks for checking back in with us on Teams for Business on another episode. I'm your host, Kywin,
I'm Jackie.
I'm Ivan.
And I'm Jack.
and this is part two of discussing whether or not businesses should be prioritizing environmental sustainability. And we're also going to be diving into the topic of ESG scores and DEI on this part of the episode. So, just kind of to start, I guess we should kind of talk about a brief overview of what ESG scores are and kind of like how they relate to sustainability in the business context. Does anyone want to get started?
Oh, okay. So, in my opinion, ESG is really important, especially for investors, potential investors, like different levels. Maybe like if you're at a hedge fund on that level where you're managing many millions or even billions of dollars, to even like everyday common like day traders, even like when you're messing around at maximum like couple of $1,000. I think ESG is really important, because ESG is known as a risk factor, and like um the more riskier it is, that means the less likely you would want to uh invest in such a business. So I think business in general should, if they want to get investors, they should probably focus more on ESG, simply because that's the way investors want it, but also how the world is seeing, businesses, and how the government is acting. Like if the business is working in some sort of environmentally conscious way, like they have like zero carbon emissions, or zero waste packaging, then that just boosts like consumer morale. They boost consumers want to buy their product because their product is good, and because their product is environmentally conscious. So that's why I think, like, definitely business should look into some sort of environmental sustainability.
Just adding on to that point, I think kind of like in terms of ESG, it's just people give each company a score, right? And basically the higher the score is kind of seen as demonstrating a stronger commitment to sustainability. But sustainability is only like one part of ESG. I guess the S and the G are kind of like the social and the governance part of the companies. And I do think that this is important and kind of like knowing whether or not to invest in companies. I know there's a whole sector of investing kind of like called ESG investing. And basically you kind of know like what type of company it is when you kind of look at their ESG score, whether or not they're like kind of like they're treating their employees correctly as well. That's part of it as well. I just think that ESG scores are kind of like a good indicator of that. And yeah, so not only the environmental part, but also like the social and the governance part as well. Okay, and then moving on to our next point, I guess what are like some of the compelling reasons for businesses to prioritize sustainability beyond just meeting like the regulatory requirements? Why, as a business, should they be prioritizing sustainability?
I'm gonna start this one off. As Ivan said, like ESG scores are like risk factors. A better ESG score will attract like more like stakeholders and more investors, because like a better ESG score could indicate that this business is like less risky. So definitely, so yeah, investors can definitely like use those like ESG factors to say, oh, maybe I should invest in this company. Maybe I shouldn't invest in this company. And so maybe it is a strategic for businesses to pursue more ESG practices to increase to increase like the likelihood that of investment and be more successful on a business spectrum.
Just jumping back in, I guess next question would be why is diversity and equity and inclusion, DEI, essential for businesses in today's world?
I
I
think
I
there's-
oh,
Oh, I
you
mean,
can
go
go
ahead.
first.
No, it's fine. You go.
Okay, so in my opinion, diversity is especially important in workforce, simply because sometimes in the workplace there are too many you know of like the male versus female proportion may be very off, and that may lead to different problems. And especially as a very large organization working with like different types of people, diversity is especially important in that aspect. Like a female would more prefer to work with someone who relates to them, same with males. And then if we go and touch upon like ethnicity, like if you have a market in China, in Japan, or like India or in Europe, they would want to work with someone who's Chinese, Japanese, Indian, European. I mean, there are also like different people with different preferences, but ultimately, as a business, diversity is extremely important in the workplace, but also as a form of working with customers, finding a bigger market.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's very similar to what I was going to say. And also the fact that like when you have like more diversity, you also have like more perspectives and like you get like different ideas, different like ways to approach things, especially like if your team is like more of like a problem solving oriented team and like your entire job is like create something that can solve a certain problem or like do something that like is for a problem, then you have a lot more like ideas, a lot more like different ways to approach it. On the other side, if you're also like one of the teams where you have to like come up with broader solutions, like be creative, having like different perspectives, like people who have like lived elsewhere, like even like taking diversity from like a different standpoint, like from where you are, for example, like if you're an immigrant, if you're like you're born in the US, like if you're from like if you immigrated from India, if you immigrated from China, like the problems you faced are probably very different than someone who grew up on like Upper East Side Manhattan in New York. Like that's just like very different. So you get like different perspectives and different ways of like handling things. And then also like as Ivan mentioned, like sometimes people prefer to like customers especially like they might be looking for someone who's like similar to them in background or like like those kind of factors, which is also why like I know like a lot of people really value diversity in movies, like which is why I think Barbie like recently is like getting really praised for their diversity, because like it teaches like little girls or like little boys whatever that like like these people exist and like it's not just like one skinny blonde girl that's a Barbie. So I think like the point of like wanting to relate to someone and like having that relationship is also like really important for diversity.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything that's been said. Just adding on, like I think like some consumers may need to like may look up to like potentially the diversity of the company to see, oh, is this company relatable? Does it cater to like my experiences? So diversity definitely is necessary if you want to like expand into a new market. Maybe they have a different pain point than what others have been experiencing, and maybe just to increase like their like I guess their like value proposition towards different customers of different like diverse backgrounds, that they can like implement more diverse practices, diversity to make sure that like all those like practices, all those like different like pain points are like really considered and stuff. So it just allows the business to cater more to like their like general audience of like all, that are like experiencing all different types of like situations.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I definitely think like a diverse kind of like company, a diverse workforce better helps like people connect with a more diverse customer base. I kind of think you want to cover like have people relate to all types of customers because you want to grow your customer base as fast as possible. And not only that, I think it just the innovation and creativity go up when it's diverse people coming together because of the different like backgrounds and experiences they have. It's just when different ideas come together, that's when companies best grow. And now that I think we've taken a look at the benefits of DEI and diversity, what do you think are some challenges that kind of like prevent businesses from implementing DEI initiatives, and like how can companies kind of overcome these challenges?
Well, I was gonna add on to like a little bit, as the DEI also includes equality, and I feel like that's a very important thing because we should be paying people based on their talents, not based on stuff they can't control, which is like how they look, what gender they are. And like the really big problem, especially in the States, is the gender pay gap. And with DEI, I think that should help solve the problem, because we should, instead of like paying someone less because they're a female, we should pay them based on their skills, because some people are extremely well talented and does extremely good job in their job, but may be paid less than someone else because of their gender. And so I feel like DEI will probably help that. And addressing this question, I think some difficulties a company may face implementing DEI would be like internal corporate, like the C-suite. That might be a really big problem because a lot of company C-suites are filled with, old white men. And they tend to believe in values that are not parallel with today's ideas. And today we have stuff like DEI, we focus on diversity, focus on equality, focus on inclusion. But however, the C-suite is really hard to get into, especially for younger people. And so the old ideas that stayed in business still lingers, especially at the top of the management ladder, which I feel like will be difficult for stuff like DEI get implemented into a lot of big companies.
Yeah, also taking this on from like a more legal perspective, I know like sometimes like this isn't about like challenges implementing DEI initiatives. It's more so about like just discrimination and like diversity like practices as a whole. But like legally there's a thing called like the business necessity clause, which is where companies well, to back up a little bit, just like for reference, in the United States, it's like illegal to discriminate someone based off like a few different factors, such as like their race, their ethnicity, sex, religion, things like that. Like you can't do that in employment law. But there is a thing called like the business necessity clause, where if you're able to show like your business, like the job description, like needs to be a certain thing, then you're allowed to discriminate against them, or like just use some kind of like factor to discriminate because that's like what your business needs. And that's like, I know one thing that kind of happens often, like if a business is sued for example, like being discriminatory against a certain group of people, I know like that the business necessity is a very common defense that some companies use in order to like try to not get sued and like not have the case win in like the plaintiff's favor. But I feel like that's like one of the things like that can be a little bit difficult, because while sometimes like the business necessity clause is just the company trying to like get out of like paying millions of dollars to the people they discriminated against, but sometimes that is like a genuine thing that needs to happen. Like for instance, like people with college degrees, right? Like some jobs you kind of just need to have a degree versus like you can like get away with not having one. So that is definitely one thing. And then also like I think just there's like things in the law where you're able to like get around that so much. But like within those contexts of like that doesn't exist, or like within the context of like there are no pre-existing barriers at the company, like they genuinely need to have someone that fits this type of qualification there. I think like there definitely are like challenges to like having DI initiatives, such as like people just might not want to apply for that job, like right, like if you're not a super desirable job, you might just only be getting one type of people to apply, and like in that case it's like kind of difficult to really judge where morally the company is when it might not be their fault entirely.
Yeah, just gonna add on to like Jackie's point, like sometimes like just the industry or like the circumstances that a company may work in, it may just like cater to like just a specific type of like worker or something, like a specific type of employee. And if you were to implement those DEI practices, maybe you might not be as credible because you've only like tried to like reach those like certain like type of like consumers. So I think it could be like very difficult for those businesses of those types to certainly to like start implementing like DEI initiatives, but definitely thinking about more like DI, like I guess like DI expansion programs that would definitely help, and maybe just like improving like company cultures to make it like more inclusive for like the work. So yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree. There's like quite a few challenges. I think like one of the issues is that like some companies may just hire like underrepresented individuals just to like simply fulfill like a quota or something. It's not truly like trying to turn to inclusion and equitable opportunities, but you're just trying to fulfill a quota and say that your company is quote unquote diverse, and but they're not really truly giving them like equal access to opportunities or like leadership roles. And I think that's an issue in terms of when you're saying you're trying to implement DEI initiatives, that I see that as like an issue that these people have to face. And moving on to my next point, I think what are some tangible benefits that you think businesses can experience by like truly prioritizing DEI efforts, not just to make it look like you're trying to be diverse, but truly prioritizing these efforts? What do you think businesses, what are some benefits for businesses?
I mean, if it's made obvious that a business does prioritize DEI, then more people will be willing to stay and work for a company, and also more people will be willing to find a job at that certain company. Like a big problem with like, especially with high tech, is that there's little to none corporate loyalty, company loyalty, even though they're giving out like free food, you know, like stuff like they try to make you stay. Um, However, like if they kind of implement some sort of DEI, they show that they care about their workers, they care about like promoting equality. Um, then more people will be like, hey, I can't find this at any other company. Why not stay? I'm getting paid a lot, I'm getting paid enough. The company obviously cares about me, so why it doesn't hurt to stay, as opposed to the current culture now. It'd be like, oh my god, my stock options are going to run out, I need to move on, find a better company, earn more money. So like, I think that would probably be the most short-term tangible benefit companies can see.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think also, I think there's like been research that's shown that like more diverse groups of people like in the workplace, they're more likely to have like better conflict resolution or just less conflict as a whole. And I mean, obviously, again, every company is different, like their levels of like how fast paced they are different, but as a whole, like having less conflict is always a good thing. So that's definitely like if you're able to avoid that, or if you're able to like sit down and like be adults and like talk it out, that's also very important rather than just like having a bunch of like company politics and like um almost counterproductive things like that. So I think that's definitely one more thing where they can like a more productive workspace can actually focus on their tasks without having to like do other things like that. And then I think Ivan also briefly touched upon this, but there's also like I think research that shows they're more like it's better for like well-being and just like personal like mental health things like that, because it's a lot more inclusive and there's usually going to be like a lot more like respect on like individual identities versus everyone just being like a certain type of person. And so there's usually more like acceptance and like more support, and the companies like have more like infrastructure in place to support those like their employees.
Yeah, definitely agree that with everything that's been said so far. Maybe another tangible benefit that a business could experience with like putting like DEI efforts is maybe the um the business will have like a better like reputation to like its consumers, because like so maybe if they implement DEI, then some consumers may feel more comfortable like being like a consumer from that company, because they know that they have someone that is within the businesses like employees and ranks that can help like influence decisions, which just makes them feel more comfortable, because like then the consumers will say, oh, maybe my issue or my pain point is being somewhat represented in those like business decisions, which could potentially lead to like businesses that implement DI practices to cater to those like pain points that people of like different like diverse backgrounds need, which would 100% attract a lot of consumers to that business.
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, I think the largest kind of two benefits kind of go hand in hand in that like you businesses do get like positive brand image and reputation just simply from the fact that they are trying to be diverse. This kind of helps them with their ESG score as well, kind of, like showing that they care about like their workplace environment, and hand in hand with that, like customers also feel like their needs are better served by specific people, by a diverse amount of people. They can relate better to the company itself. And with that, we're going to move on to the takeaways for the episode. I think that my biggest takeaway is that, like in the long term, all businesses kind of, depending what your needs are, but most businesses should be prioritizing sustainability, diversity. This is going to only help help you as a business in the long term. And I think that even for the short term losses that you might happen from having to make the switch to incorporating a more diverse workforce or trying to be more sustainable, the long-term benefits largely outweigh that.
Yeah, and one of my major takeaways that how the importance of DEI, especially in the context of like retaining your workforce for large companies, and especially with what's happening today, what's in the news, like a lot of diversity, chief diversity officers are getting, they don't have any jobs, or like their jobs are merged with other roles within the company. I feel like it's some sort of situation with like a 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And I think in the long term, even though it's not looking good now, the DEI efforts will be rewarded soon in the long term.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think one of my biggest takeaways is just understanding how important DEI is important. Understand how important DEI is for like different workspaces and things like that. And Ivan mentioned like for bigger companies and retention, but I think also like within those companies, for the company itself, like how effective they are with like, for instance, communicating with their customers, for instance, like conflict resolution or just having conflict as a whole. Research has shown that companies that are more diverse with like their workforce are better at those things. And so I think it's like important for the company to like consider from a more like pragmatic standpoint that diversity is beneficial for them rather than just having the same type or like demographic of people over and over again, because that can create a lot of like counterproductive instances, like a lot of like politics or a lot of like company politics or a lot of things that are really so much working towards the actual goal of the company.
Yeah, my major takeaway is like how DEI practices could be implemented as like I guess in some sort of a way like a marketing thing to like attract more like consumers, because like if like DEI is like implemented, you're attracting more employees or more executives from different like backgrounds, maybe with different pain points that could be like resolved in the business or improved upon. Then some consumers may look up to those employees or executives as inspiration and just feel a closer connection with that company, and then that will attract that company more to like people of like the same type, and then the business will definitely get a lot of like positive results from it. So even if like right now like DEI is like being hotly debated right now, I think that there's no doubt that DEI will be super beneficial for like a business in the future in terms of like catering to its customers and all the other points that Ivan, Jackie, and Kevin have discussed.
And that's it for our episode today on diversity and sustainability. Thanks for tuning into the Teens for Business podcast, and we'll see everyone next week.